everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk boxing now, and this will be a full-on fight review of the recent bout between Oleksandr Usyk and Dereck Chisora. So as usual with these videos, I'd warn you now that I will be spoiling the results of the fight, so if you haven't seen the fight yet, I advise you to stop watching now, go away, catch up with highlights or full version of the fight, whatever platform you can find, and then come back and watch this fight review. So spoiler warning has been given now in 3, 2, 1. So overall, when we look at this fight, and it resulted in a very comprehensive performance from Oleksandr Usyk over Dereck Chisora, a 12-round convincing win that we had on here, and to be honest, it pretty much played out for the most part as what I believe this fight would do. No way was Usyk going to go in there and knock out Dereck Chisora in 3 or 4 rounds. You know, Chisora is the bigger man, Usyk is lighter on his feet, and he doesn't really do that. If you watch actually the majority of Usyk's fights, it's very rare that he takes out people within 2 or 3 or 4 rounds. He's a very patient fighter, he's a very methodical and skillful fighter, and he likes to set the pace and set his own tempo before really stepping on in the middle to later rounds. So you weren't never going to get any early knockouts from Usyk. There was a slight possibility from Chisora, only because we all know Chisora is super aggressive, always come forward, swings away, and you never know if he caught Usyk flush. Because this is Usyk's really first test at heavyweight, we never would know how he would cope with a full-on flush punch from a heavyweight. So there was the possible scenario there. And if we look at the fight overall, I think Chisora actually performed very well, in my opinion. We all knew straight away, if we look at the first couple of rounds, he came forward as expected, because that is Chisora's style. He's very aggressive, very proactive. That's what makes him such an exciting fighter, and I believe that's why he continually gets these big opportunities at pay-per-views. And he started that fashion in the first couple of rounds. Went after Usyk. Usyk was on his bike. He was moving around, using his jab, using his movement, ducking and diving, really moving all over the ring as Chisora came forward. Now, what Chisora did very well is that he was using his head movement and lateral movement. He was going from side to side, and that's what you have to do. If you are the pursuing fighter, right, you have to use head movement, so to make sure that you're not getting picked off as you're trying to work your way in, and that is exactly what Chisora did. The flaw in Chisora's approach is that he never threw enough body punches. He was moving from side to side, he was cornering Usyk, but he never threw combinations. He never really went for it in terms of the body punches, and the body punches are key, because that's how you pin down somebody who is lighter on their feet, someone who's very good in terms of their footwork and their coordination. If they're constantly moving around the ring, then what you have to do is pressure them and pound into the body, so then that will slow them maybe into the later rounds, and that's when you can get them closer into the corners and use more your combination punches, and that's when you can hopefully land much more power shots to the face and nail your opponent that way. But Chisora didn't do that, so Usyk had the much more faster hand speed, the much more quicker combinations, so he was able to really maneuver Chisora around and really fight at, for the most part, his own pace and his own tempo. I gave the first round to Chisora just because I felt his aggressive style probably had the most success in these earlier rounds. Usyk really didn't take any damage, but wasn't really doing anything impactful on Chisora. The second round I gave to Usyk again because I just felt the cleaner work was coming from Usyk, and that was the problem that Chisora had. If you're not really throwing a lot and you're missing a lot, then the person who's picking you off, pot shotting, using jabs, using combinations, they're always going to win the rounds. And that was the key for Usyk, especially in rounds 4, 5, and I think 7 as well, which I all gave to Usyk. It was the cleaner work from him. He wasn't really causing any major damage to Chisora, but these were scoring punches, and he was very comfortable, I think, at this point. You know, he was confident enough in his ability to stay away from Chisora, keep at a safe enough distance where he could just keep using his footwork, bobbing around, 1-2 combinations, in and out, and moving around. And Chisora, it was a very considered aggression. That's why I give credit to Chisora. We've seen in so many of his fights where he's swinging away, winging away, and missing a lot of times to go with the aggression. Now, he actually showed a bit more restraint maybe perhaps a bit too much restraint, because obviously the dilemma is if you keep throwing and swinging away, it's going to use up a lot more oxygen. It's going to tire you, especially in the arms, a lot more, and it's going to cause you a lot more to breathe heavy, and that's going to give the advantage to the much more fleeter-footed fighter. But Chisora wasn't swinging and winging away. Yes, he was coming forward and he was trying to impose himself, but he wasn't throwing forward. And I actually think there was a bit of thought about Chisora's performance. I think he wanted to make sure that he lasted as later into the fight as possible. He didn't want to go out there, swing left, right and centre and maybe get taken out in rounds 4 and 5. I think the game plan from Chisora was to be aggressive, but control the aggression and maybe go for it in the later rounds. But the problem you have, if you're not really connecting and striking down your opponent a lot, then the person who's showing the much more of a coordinated work, the much more smoother and cleaner work, is always going to score points and always going to win rounds. And I think that was the overall message throughout this fight, is that you had somebody in Usyk who was able to really use better method, better technique, better speed of hand, better speed of foot, and was always able to evade, for the most part, any pressure that Chisora put on him. And again, Chisora, I gave a couple of rounds. I gave him the 8th round. I gave him the 10th round as well, because I think there was some instances where Usyk wasn't really doing a lot. You know, if you're not throwing combinations, throwing little jabs here or there, if they're not really impactful, then Chisora was having some success. And because I found those moments of success with Chisora a lot more imposing than what I thought Usyk was, so that's why I gave a couple of rounds to Chisora. But I think it was just a case of, you have to remember, Usyk is not a brawler. He is not a power puncher as such. I know the hardcore fans, you know, they like to look at the cruiserweight as the division. That's where you get the real kind of brutal killers, the real hard men. But Usyk is a very skilled fighter. He's a very methodical fighter. He's not going to really waste his shots too much. He's not going to really expand too much energy. There's a lot of thought in his approach, and you can clearly see that going into this fight. This is a boxer who is looking to win the fight by boxing, not really through high aggression. He's not looking to really take out his opponent. There was no intent from him to try and make a big impression, because this was seen as his first real heavyweight. He didn't really go out there to try and destroy Chisora, because he knows, and I think if you know your boxing, he doesn't have the attributes to do that, not at this division, right? So he was just using his skills, using his movement, using his angles, his lateral movement, to always make sure he could throw 3 full punch combinations and still have enough to keep away from Chisora. And that's exactly what he did. So in the end, I credit Chisora for really lasting the distance and making it competitive. It was never really a close fight, and that's only because, like I said, the cleaner work, the cleaner shots, the more accurate shots were all coming from Usyk. So if you're cleaner, you're more accurate, you're landing more, then you are going to score more rounds, win more points, and win the fight, right? So in many ways, this is what Chisora was designed for. It was designed to have a heavyweight who had some credibility about him, had a bit of a threat, but was never really going to have that youthful energy or endurance to be able to catch Usyk really full on and put him under major pressure, right? It was that really opponent for Usyk to break into this heavyweight division, which he did. So in terms of winning the fight very clinically and very successfully, Usyk did what he was required to do. You can't really dismiss him too much for that. I don't think people should be getting too carried away thinking, on the one hand, well, Usyk didn't knock him out, so he's not really a contender. But at the same time, because Usyk won so comprehensively, oh, that means he's a huge threat. If you're going to ask me right now, I think we need to see Usyk fight more opponents. I don't even think he gets anywhere near to beating any of the big three. The big three being, of course, AJ, Wilder and Fury. I just don't think he's got the attributes to what you need. He's got the skills, he's got the technique, yes, but the difference in fighting those three is that he would have to initiate the action. He would have to pursue them. You know, Usyk is 6'3", but obviously that's massive in relative terms. But you're looking at the big three, Joshua, Wilder, Fury, who were all, what, 6'9", 6'10", right? So straight away, they're all going to have the height, they're all going to have the reach, and they're all going to have the physical strength and power on Usyk, right? So unless they would charge forward mindlessly and he would be able to outmaneuver him, he would struggle really to impose himself on those three. And whereas Chisora, okay, he wasn't out of shape, he looked in good condition for this fight, but he's not, if you like, the typical athletic or the ultimate athletic boxer, right? If you look at AJ, Wilder and Fury recently as well, all of those are really prime condition athletes fighting at a natural weight for them, right? So they're going to be able to sustain enough activity for 12 rounds. They're going to be able to keep up the pace, no problems, and they would be the ones who would be able to really fend off Usyk with their jab and combination work, right? So Usyk would find it very hard to really work his way into it. A bit like what Lomachenko struggled a bit with Lopez the other time, right? And I think at this stage, Usyk's not ready. He's not ready to make a big enough impression on the big three. I think what we would need to see, or what I would prefer to see, is Usyk fight someone like a Takam or a Tom Schwartz, or even a Michael Hunter, or maybe a Dominic Brazil. I want to see him fight that caliber of heavyweight, someone who's going to have a bit more fitness and a bit more endurance about him, and present him with a different problem, a different dilemma. Not someone who's going to come forward and not really have any real sense of combination work. I want to see someone coming in with a bit of technique and a bit more skill set, and really look to test Usyk a bit more and really ask more questions of Usyk, and maybe force him into scenarios where, yes, he would have to come forward a bit more and he wouldn't be as secure in just being able to pick his moments, pick his shots and maneuver his opponent around the ring. So that's what I would like to see Usyk in against a bit more. And I think he needs 2, 3, maybe 4 more fights with that caliber opponent, and then that's when we can get a better gauge of where he is at this division. So a good comprehensive win for Usyk, but I think at the moment, don't get any ideas about him fighting AJ, Wilder or Fury at this stage. I think they're just a league above him at that moment in terms of experience at the weight and in terms of physical attributes. I'd probably even say probably the same about Dillian Whyte, though I think that would be actually a closer contest. Dillian Whyte won't be charging forward like Chisora, so I think Usyk would definitely be able to increase the punch output and the punch volume against Dillian Whyte, but would he have enough power to keep off Dillian Whyte, who is a much more considerate with his punches, and again, he has got a pretty devastating left hand. So if he was managed to land that and connect that with Usyk, how would Usyk cope? So at a stretch, I would probably throw him in there at Dillian Whyte at most, and I'll give him a decent chance against Dillian Whyte. But for the big three, forget about it for now. So I just think a good test for Usyk. He passed it, but I want to see him against 3 or 4 more heavyweights first before even talking about whether he can fight AJ or not. Now, everybody's going to throw in the fact that, yes, he is now the WBO mandatory for Joshua, but I've got a sneaky feeling that the AJ and Fury fight probably won't happen, and I can see the WBO version being vacated by AJ, giving Usyk to be a champion. I said in my preview, I think the original design before everything got disrupted by COVID was to have Usyk become a WBO heavyweight and really build up his reputation and status as a heavyweight, and then you can have the unification fight against Joshua, because then that would carry more value, right? Because then Usyk would be seen as a much more revered and recognised heavyweight, right? So that's what I think will happen. I think the WBO version will get vacated, because I don't think that AJ and Fury, unfortunately, will not happen, and I think they will look to build up Usyk. But for right now, a good performance from Usyk, a very intelligent boxing performance, which is what you would really expect from Usyk. A good effort from Chisora, no shame at all about the loss, and he can come back again. He is a very exciting fighter, and I think a lot of boxing fans, they relate to Chisora. They like the fact that he's been in the game for a long time. They respect his longevity. They like the fact that he's an aggressive, come forward fighter. That's what I think most boxing fans like, is someone who looks to initiate the action. So I think he can still have a couple of big fights, but I think in terms of Usyk, fight a couple of moderate to decent skilled heavyweight first. I want to see 3 or 4 more heavyweight bouts before we can get any more further impression as to realistically he has a shot against the big 3, because I think if he fights any of the big 3 right now, he will lose, even against Wilder, because again, Wilder is very lean, he's very athletic, and Wilder will be looking to keep off Usyk with that long range, that left jab, that left arm, and then if he lands against Usyk, then it's good night Usyk. So yeah, so right now, a good performance from Usyk. He has passed some sort of test at heavyweight, but again, he needs to fight 3 or 4 more decent to good contenders first before we can start hyping him up in any potential match against AJ or any potential chance of him becoming undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. So those are my thoughts, and that's my fight review on the bouts between Usyk and Chisora. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll see now. We've got a couple of more high-profile fights coming very soon. We've got the Brook and Crawford fight, which I will give a preview shortly. Are you more convinced? Are you less convinced? Do you think he needs to fight a couple of more heavyweights before we see really if he can do some major damage and the division? And do you give Chisora any more credit in the past? And what do you think will be his future going ahead in boxing for next year? So those are my thoughts for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.